We have soul. Welcome to Law and Society. Please subscribe. And I want to talk to you briefly about the weekend's protests and then give you an update about a few things that I think is important for all of us to know now as it is just starting out. So, firstly, this weekend's protest showed the world that Donald Trump does not speak for America. Americans do. And we do it with humor and we do it with soul, with songs and laughter on signs and through bullhorns. The laughter and humor are important. They both draw attention to what's written or said, and it makes you think. It brings levity to a very dark situation that we find ourselves in. And we do these things persistently and we do not let up. We do it peacefully because we honor our Constitution and stand up to defend it. We realize that it is upon us to keep this republic alive for future generations. Our voices will get louder with time, and the protests will fill the streets. I only hope that we keep honoring the Constitution by making sure that our protests are peaceful. They have been resoundingly so now, but I just want to warn that as the impact of Donald Trump's economic and domestic policy catastrophes, we are going to see an upheaval in people's lifestyles, in the consumer index, in unemployment insurance applications. And we're going to see that at that time, anger will build. But project that anger towards meaningful, peaceful, funny, and understandable messaging instead of going out in anger. Peaceful protest is an American right. Political violence is never all right. And political violence is a crime. So, let's stay peaceful. Let's honor the Constitution at a time when people keep on attacking our Constitution. By people, I mean Donald Trump and his government. So, with that said, I would like to move on to a story that I read on CNN that says Salvadorian President Bukele has proposed a prisoner exchange with Venezuela, offering to repatriate hundreds of Venezuelans who were deported from the United States in exchange for political prisoners. So it's just, at this point, it's just human trafficking because we haven't afforded these people who are residents of the United States due process of law. And Bukele is already trying to ship them to Venezuela to make it even more difficult for us to get to them. Think about people like Andry Romero. He left the regime, he dissented with the authoritarian regime, didn't feel safe in Venezuela, and went to the United States seeking asylum. And he's now in that prison. A gay makeup artist who has a few tattoos that they didn't like. The ICE agents didn't like. Think about people like him. If there's one of him, there's many, many more Venezuelans in El Salvador right now who fled Venezuela because of their disagreement with the regime and because they didn't feel safe there. And now Bukele is just going to swap them for prisoners. Like, these are illegal prisoners who have been illegally detained under a contract with the United States and Bukele. If the contract says that you can do whatever you want with these people, then that's human trafficking. This is due process of law. This is not deportation. This is something much darker. This is like this understanding between authoritarians of the world that we are going to bend the rule of law to our will and do it at the expense of the peace and tranquility of not only the people who are suffering cruel and unusual punishment in Bukele's prisons, but also their families. So it's important, Gavin Newsom said something about this is a distraction, talking about Andrew Romero and Abrego Garcia and Merwel Gutierrez, because there are other things there are other things happening, and just as you will see in a minute, we can talk about other things while also talking about the deprivation of due process rights for American residents, and now them being subjected to cruel and unusual punishment in a prison, a terrorist prison, a maximum security terrorist prison in El Salvador. No right to counsel. We don't know where. We're talking about three people. We know, I told you about three names: Merwel Gutierrez, Andrew Romero, and Abrego Garcia. But they were sent with at least 230 more. So what happens to them? 90% of whom, initially it was understood that it'd be 75% of whom, but now 90% of whom don't have any conviction or criminal convictions. So keep them in your mind and call your representatives to see what they're doing to get these people back. Not to set them free, but so they get due process of law and go where they are legally supposed to be under the law. If they are all right to be sent to Venezuela, then send them directly there. If they have to go somewhere else, you send them there. You don't make these sort of blanketed authoritarian extra governmental things to, and then deliberately try to break the law in an effort to undermine the rule of law. And now, not just our national government, but the international order of laws. It has to be violation of some sort of international law to be trafficking these people without due process, without cause. It's one of the most, I think, heinous things developing in the world today, and we need to keep our eyes on that. Then, next story, I'd like to talk to you about Pete Hegseth. Well, Pete Hegseth, at least the bright side of it is, once he gets pushed out of the DOD after he's pushed out of his position from Defense Secretary, he'll finally be able to go back to his, alcoholic, axe-throwing days. That was more fun than doing push-ups with service members anyway. Like, who does that at his age? He needs to, drink and be happy. Rachel Maddow reports, unlike the chat in which the Atlantic was included, the newly revealed one was created by Hegseth, which is another Signal chat, named Defense Team Huddle. It included his wife and about a dozen other people. He used his private phone, not his government one, to access this Signal chat. going on with the same story, Politico says former top Pentagon official warns dysfunction that could topple Hegseth, describing a department collapsing from backstabbing and constant missteps. Perhaps like the one where we just heard that Hegseth has had other Signal chats where they have talked about, as we will see from this excerpt written by Greg Jaff, Eric Schmidt, and Maggie Haberman. I'm assuming from the New York Times, that was posted by Tom Vietor of Pod Save America. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth shared detailed information about forthcoming strikes in Yemen on March 15th in a private Signal group chat that included his wife, brother, and personal lawyer, according to 4 people with knowledge of the chat. Some of those people said that the information Mr. Hegseth shared on the Signal chat included the flight schedules for the F-18 Hornets targeting the Houthis in Yemen. Essentially the same attack plans he had shared on a separate Signal chat the same day that mistakenly included the editor of The Atlantic. Mr. Hegseth's wife, Jennifer, a former Fox News producer, is not a Defense Department employee, but she has traveled with him overseas and drawn criticism for accompanying her husband to sensitive meetings with foreign leaders. Like, what? Pete Hegseth thinks that this is the Department of Defense is his Department of Defense, and is because he has marital privilege that his wife is now allowed to come into classified meetings? Or apparently Signal has become something that the government has designated to be a secure channel through which you share classified information, initially to heads of departments and principal officers, but now here to your wife and your brother and your personal lawyer. I don't understand why he's still there. He should already be gone. And this is a display and a result of Senate's failure to perform its advice and consent power. And shame on Senator Thune, Majority Leader, for letting these mishaps and these incompetent people through without ever thinking about what this could do to the country and to our national security. And now within a month's time, we know of 2 potential Signal chat breaches that if we know about it, you better bet your bottom dollar that Russia, China, Iran, North Korea know about it. And you think after getting this information coming out in public that our allies, or our former allies now I should say, Canada, Europe, they are going to share their intelligence? You think a trade alliances between even India or finally coming to a good alliance with Japan or United Kingdom, is that you think that's going to happen if they realize that intelligence sharing or trading is one thing, but intelligence sharing with the US government is no longer a go? We don't share what we consider our SCIF, sensitive compartmentalized information facility materials, to go to the United States. And as this is happening, Reuters reports that China warned countries against striking a broader economic deal with the United States at its expense, ratcheting up its rhetoric in a spiraling trade war between the world's 2 biggest economies. Mind you, the US economy is still more than twice as big as the Chinese economy, but what China is doing now is playing sort of soft trade warfare with rhetoric, instilling fear in the stability of the American economy and the American dollar. So by undermining faith in American economy and the American dollar, it does America a huge harm, because it is America's currency and America's economy that makes America such a good place to do business, because we have a consumer economy. We are a not a free trade. We well, at some point were with some partners, but we are no longer viable to the world, and China is just putting more, pouring more gasoline on the fire to make it bigger. The sort of propaganda will take effect and will impact how the World Bank and how other banks look at our credit rating. I wouldn't be surprised if our credit rating is lowered. And that would be another sort of economic catastrophe. So, with that said, the last piece of news is that Mr. Vance, Vice President Vance, has arrived in India for a 4-day trip on a trade deal to India as it finds an alternative to China. Associated Press said that Vance had arrived for a 4-day visit in New Delhi so that India could avoid tariffs and negotiate a bilateral deal with Washington. I think that is probably the only reasonable news that you can think of to find a favorable trading partner with India as an alternative to China to be able to keep the American economy afloat, because the American-China trade war doesn't seem to be going away. So at this time, I keep saying, conserve your resources, be aware and observe the news and daily information. Sort of skip through the jargon, but pay attention to the news. And exercise restraint if you are in a public place or even in a forum where, just this morning I was engaging with somebody with a sort of a warped sense of reality, and I wasted too much time. I shouldn't have even engaged. So restraint should have been something that I followed this morning, so I didn't have to sort of go and explain to that person why what they're saying is not accurate. But I'd rather spend that time reading something more constructive. And, always have courage to stand up to bullies. Have courage to stand up for your country, as we were seeing in these protests. And as I believe, the more authoritarian Donald Trump gets and his government gets, the more protests we're going to see and the louder the protests are going to get. And it seems like Donald Trump listened to the Supreme Court's order to not ship people to El Salvador, the direct order that was issued at 1 a.m, and literally turned the buses around back to the detention facility in Texas. So pressure works, as Senator Van Hollen has shown that pressure worked even in El Salvador. So keep calling your representatives, Republican or Democrat, about this issue of Abrego Garcia and the people who are in CCOT and being moved around in El Salvador to other prisons without ever getting due process of law from the United States where they are legal residents. And, I wanted to also end with that, obviously, because we are in this mess and it looks like we can't wrap our minds around it, and perhaps we can, but we have to be aware of what is going on. And I believe that that awareness is something that the current administration, Donald Trump's reign, is trying to battle against. There's this disinformation war that's being held that is shielding people from the truth with false narratives to this day, despite the fact that the market dropped so much, and despite the fact that the prospect of how these hundreds of thousands of federal workers working are going to get laid off, are on administrative leave now. Like, what will happen to the economy should that really become an eventuality? So this is not for alarm, but it is for you to wake up and join the fight. So many of you have, and I thank you so much for it. And I thank you very much for listening to me, giving me your time. And please subscribe and share. And I will talk to you soon.